Okay, some people are still rolling in, but we're just going to get started with a few housekeeping notes for the session today. First of all, thank you for coming to our webinar. My name's Taylor. I work at Community Legal Services. Just so you know, today's webinar is being recorded. You'll notice that you're muted and cameras off, and so attendees will stay that way for the duration of the webinar. You'll also notice there's no chat function for this webinar because we have so many attendees, but there is a Q&A that's open. So if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box. We'll answer them as we go along, and we'll answer as many as we can get to. We might not get to them all, but we will be sending out a follow-up email after the webinar sometime this week, and we'll include more answers to questions then. We'll also include the slides from this presentation, and we'll also include a link to the recording of this webinar. So you'll have access to all of that after the webinar is over later this week. Today we'll be hearing from Louise Hayes of Community Legal Services and Mary Pat Pileggi of Community Legal Services. You'll also be hearing from Ann Sanders of Just Harvest, and Just Harvest is an organization that helps with SNAP applications in the Pittsburgh area. And I think that's it. We're going to get right into the presentation, so I'll hand it over to Louise.
Great. Thanks so much, Taylor. If you could, next slide, please. So today we're going to talk about what's the time limit or work requirement. Those are two terms we use sort of interchangeably. There's a time limit for people who don't meet the work requirement. When is it going into effect? Why does this matter? Who's exempt? How do you prove that you are exempt? How do you comply? What happens if you aren't exempt and you don't comply? How will people know about the requirement? I forgot to put on this slide. We're going to be covering immigrant eligibility. That's another big sort of separate topic that Mary Pat's going to be talking about after we talk about the work requirement. And then how can people help? Next slide, please. Just a little background on SNAP. SNAP is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as food stamps. Nearly 2 million Pennsylvanians receive SNAP, including 500,000 in Philadelphia. That's 30% of Philadelphians are on SNAP. SNAP brings in $354 million a month in federally funded benefits into Pennsylvania, about $180 per person per month. And households who are eligible are under 200% of the poverty level. Next slide. So HR 1, this is the big mega bill that passed Congress in early July, also called the One Big Beautiful Bill. Made a number of changes to SNAP. Harsher work requirements, which we're going to be talking about today, some of which are starting September 1st, next week. Cost shifts to states, so Pennsylvania may be on the hook for some of that $354 a month that currently the federal government is paying in SNAP benefits here, but we're not talking about that today. The bill also made cuts to immigrant eligibility, which we will be covering. And then it made other cuts to how much the federal government pays in SNAP administration and some smaller cuts to benefits, which would be a topic not covered today. Next slide. So the background on this work requirement and time limit, it's not new in the law. It was enacted in 1996 as part of the welfare reform law. Congress said that adults without dependents aged 18 to 50 could only get 3 months of SNAP in 3 years unless they're working 20 hours a week, or they are exempt, or they are in an area covered by a geographic waiver. And that age of people exposed to the time limit was increased to 55 in 2023. And then with HR 1, the 2025 budget mega bill, they expanded the time limit some more, as we will be talking about. Next slide. So why is this new in Philadelphia and in much of Pennsylvania? As I mentioned, the 1996 law gave the authority to governors to seek waivers from the time limit for areas of high unemployment. And Philadelphia has had a waiver since 1996. Republican and Democratic governors have all sought waivers for Philadelphia and many areas of Pennsylvania. And our current waiver ends August 31st. And during the pandemic, starting in 2020, there was a statewide waiver, which Pennsylvania was able to extend with use of some discretionary exemptions that it had held over from prior years. And so between 2020 and May 2025, there was no time limit anywhere in Pennsylvania. It's been rolled out in a few counties already, starting in May, but this is going to be wholly new in Philadelphia and very new in most of the rest of the state. Next slide, please. So what happened with that HR 1 in July? They essentially eliminated geographic waivers, which is why our old waiver expired August 31st, or will expire August 31st. And because of HR 1, it won't be renewed, as has happened for the last 25 years. These waivers have been renewed. The law also expanded the group of people subject to the time limit. So instead of adults up to age 55, it's now adults up to age 65. And it also, for the first time, expanded the work requirement to parents of kids at all. It's if your youngest child is 14 or over, then the time limit will apply to you. And the law also eliminated certain exemptions from the time limit that Congress had added in 2023, exemptions for people who are homeless, veterans, and former foster youth. But fortunately, Pennsylvania will continue to exempt homeless people using some of those state discretionary exemptions. Next slide. So what does this mean? The work requirement under the old rules, that's adults 18 to 54 without kids under 18, will become effective September 1st, next week. And then this expansion group, the 55 to 64-year-olds and households with children 14 or over, will begin being subject to the time limit starting in November. And people who are not meeting the work requirement and not exempt will be time limited to 3 months in a 3-year period. And if you're subject to the work requirement, you must work 80 hours a month, or an average of 20 hours a week. Next slide. So all SNAP recipients are going to be in one of these sort of buckets of exempt, which we hope will be the largest bucket. These are people who do not need to meet work rules, and they will be safe until their next renewals. Renewals are typically once a year. If you can show that you are exempt when you apply or you renew, then you should be good until the next year. Then there will be a group of people who are compliant, people who are subject to the work rules and working 20 hours a week, or there's a few other things you can do to satisfy the work rules that we're going to get into. And those people, when they stop doing that, they have to report when they stop, and then they will start getting 3 months of SNAP, because if you are not compliant and you're not exempt, then you get 3 months of SNAP in 3 years. Next slide. So what are the stakes here? The 3 months time limit is essentially an off-ramp from SNAP. Pennsylvania's experience from a previous time in 2016, when large numbers of people were subject to the work requirement all at once, was that 2/3 of non-exempt people subject to the time limit lost SNAP after 3 months. Pennsylvania's Department of Human Services estimates that 144,000 Pennsylvanians will lose SNAP once this work requirement starts. and that's 45,000 in Philadelphia. And the key way to keep your SNAP is to establish an exemption. Next slide. So when does this start? So again, there's the old rules, people up to age 55 without kids under 18. That waiver that we've had is expiring August 31st, and the time limit under the old rules starts September 1st. And the first cutoffs for people failing to meet the work requirement will be December 1st. And then this new group that HR 1 subjected to the time limit, people aged 55 to 64, parents of kids 14 or over, that time limit will be rolled out over time starting November 1st. So if a household applies for the first time after November 1st, that time limit will apply, to them right away. But current households, a family that's now getting SNAP and may have a renewal date in, say, January, they will not be subject until this time limit until their next renewal, which may be November, January, April. They get staggered over the course of the year. Next slide. So who is exempt? A lot of people should be exempt. We'll see that there are a number of categories, and this is sort of a key thing that people can do to help folks is to help them screen them and help them establish that they're exempt. Next slide. So this is the first of a couple slides with a list. Obviously, people who are older than the time limit or under 18 are exempt. People in households with kids, and again, the ages will vary. It starts with kids under 18, but starting in November, at the next time people get renewed, it'll be households with kids under 14 will be exempt. People receiving a disability benefit like SSI or Social Security disability or disability related Medicaid, those people are exempt, and DHS knows that people are receiving that because you've had to talk about your income when you applied for SNAP. And then there's a whole bunch of others. So receiving unemployment, having a medical condition that reduces your ability to work. So this is a really key one. I'm going to have another couple slides on that in a second. Next slide. Participating in a substance use disorder, mental health, or voc rehab program, pregnant, in school or job training at least half time, caring for an elderly or disabled household member. These are all exemptions. And then this last one is counterintuitive. If you're working at least 30 hours a week or earning at least $217.50 a week, that $217.50 is 30 times the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. These people are defined in the law, and this is just the way the law is set up, as exempt, even though obviously they're also complying. But that's great that they're exempt because, as I said, if you're exempt, you're good for a year. You're good until your next renewal. Otherwise, if these people, somebody who's working 30 hours a week might lose their job, and then they have to report to the county assistance office, and the time limit starts going right away. So even these people should be defined as exempt. Next slide. So going back to having a medical condition that reduces your ability to work, this is not the same definition as getting SSI or getting disability-related Medicaid. This is relatively low standard. Many conditions reduce your ability to work. For example, conditions that cause pain or fatigue or shortness of breath reduce your ability to work. Depression and anxiety could reduce your ability to work. And the way you establish this is with a form. It's called the PA 1921, signed by your medical provider. And I'm sure Lydia's already put in the chat CLS's materials. We've got a couple flyers about this form with this copies of the form on the back. We've got a flyer for clients, a flyer for medical providers. This form does not need to be signed by a doctor. There's a wide array of providers who can sign this form, such as social workers, therapists, nurses, um, any medical personnel who can be reimbursed by Medicaid can sign this form. Next slide. This is the form. You can see that the patient signs it, and then the medical provider checks box 1, says, does this person have a physical or mental condition or illness that reduces their ability to work? The provider checks yes, specifies the condition, print your name, sign, date it. Pretty straightforward. Next slide. So in addition to those federal exemptions, the law gives states a certain number of what are called discretionary exemptions, where the state can just exempt up to 8% of the population of people who are subject to the time limit. So currently, Pennsylvania is using those exemptions to protect people who are expecting to return to work within 60 days, living more than 2 hours round trip from an education or training site, receiving expedited SNAP, that's your first month SNAP issued really fast if you're poor enough, volunteering full-time in a VISTA program, experiencing homelessness is probably the biggest category in this group, and domestic violence survivors. Next slide. So how do you prove an exemption? If you're under 18 or over 55 or 65, county assistance office knows that about you. If you're receiving disability benefits, the county assistance office knows about you. We hope that the CAO won't make many mistakes on those, but you don't need to do anything. If you're earning over $217.50 a week, your pay stubs should show that, which you probably already given to the county assistance office because they need to know your income as part of the application process. People with medical conditions, there's that form that I just showed you. The rules say that other medical evidence might work, but really the form is the thing that's a surefire way to claim that exemption. And then the rules say all the other exemptions I mentioned only need to be verified if questionable. So people need to make sure that the county assistance office knows about that knows this about you, knows that you're pregnant, knows that you're caring for a disabled household member. But unless they find what you say questionable, they should take your word for it, and that should be an exemption. And then take it away, Anne. Thank you.
All right. So DHS has to notify folks before they make any changes to benefits. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how they're going to be sending out notifications here. So for folks who are currently receiving SNAP benefits, the whole time that an area is under a geographic waiver, caseworkers are supposed to be screening folks for exemptions. We know that doesn't always happen, but that is what they're supposed to be doing. So some folks are already known to be exempt in the system, and those folks will remain exempt until their next renewal date. There are some folks who are not known to be exempt. They're going to be getting mailed a checklist screening, which I'll be showing in a second here, to all the households where there's an adult who they don't know if they're exempt or not, starting September 1st. Those were already mailed out. So folks should be seeing those in their mailboxes if they haven't already. And then as folks are come up for the renewal, for folks who are current recipients, that will be discussed during their interview at renewal. We're still not sure if DHS is going to be sending out the screening form to folks as they are newly subject to the time limit in November. So, if you had if there's like a 16-year-old in your household and no one younger than that, you're exempt until November. We still aren't sure what they're going to be doing whenever that changes in November. New applicants who are applying now will see it in their eligibility determination packet, that approval packet that they get, that's usually several pages long. It will be included in that packet, not on the front page. Will be several pages in when they talk about the general work requirements and then time limits. It will say this person is subject to the time limit and will have their reporting requirements in it. Not ideal, but that's currently what they're doing. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So this is what the checklist looks like that folks are getting mailed out, that just asks about all those exemptions that Louise just went over, yes or no. It's helpful to get those into the county assistant's office as soon as possible so that they have it, they can process it, put it on file. Some of them may require extra verification if they, have a medical exemption that they might not have any evidence of. Otherwise, almost all the other ones are just, as Louise had already said, no verification necessary unless questionable. All right, we can go to the next slide. So action steps for those who meet an exemption. Make sure the CAA knows about it. Get that checklist that I just showed completed and sent in as soon as possible. CLS is going to be posting a fillable version of that on their website shortly. And then also to complete that medical exemption form if necessary and get those into the county assistant's office as soon as possible. And we can go to the next slide. So now I'm just going to walk through an example to think about those exemptions. So we're going to talk about Maria, who works 20 hours a week at $11 an hour. She also cares for her elderly mother who lives with her unpaid. And Maria also has pretty severe asthma. Would she have to comply with the extra work reporting requirements? So we can go to the next slide. So no, she would not. She's exempt for several reasons. She earns over $217.50 a week. So that will protect her even if her work hours get cut through the end of her renewal period. She's also exempt because she's a caregiver. The caregiver exemption doesn't require verification unless it's questionable. If it was questionable, something from the doctor's office saying that someone was needed in the home to care for someone else in the household with a disability would be sufficient for the county assistant's office. And she could also be exempt because of her asthma, and she could ask her doctor to fill out the medical exemption form, that PA 1921. We can go to the next slide. All right, so now I'm going to talk about complying with the work requirement for folks who aren't exempt. So we can go to the next slide. So the first way is working 20 hours a week. What's interesting about this is that work is defined more loosely than you might think. It doesn't have to be for minimum wage. It can even be work that is in-kind work. So we know some folks who maybe stay at a relative's house or something like that, and they're handy and they basically stay there rent-free, but they fix things up around the house or they do odd jobs, things like that, in exchange for their rent. That could count as work hours. They would just need something from the person that they're doing the work for that says, oh yeah, they're doing this for 20 hours a week at least and maintaining the property, and that would count as work. So obviously the easiest thing is pay stubs to verify that you're working your time, but that's what it is. Also, it doesn't have to be exactly 20 hours a week. It can fluctuate. You could work 18 one week, 22 another week. It just has to average out to 80 hours a month. A person can also request good cause. So if you normally work 20 hours a week, one week you have the flu and you miss work, that's good cause. So you can report that and still be complying even though you didn't hit that 80-hour a week or 80 hours a month mark. If someone does earn that $217.50 a week, or it's around $870 a month, if they hit that benchmark and they report that to the county assistant's office, they should then be considered exempt for the rest of their renewal period. So if people are reporting their changes, this is one of those times where reporting an increase in your wage could really help you out, so that you become exempt from this work reporting requirement for the rest of your recertification period, even if your hours go back down. It can also be combined with employment and training programs or community service to get to this 20 hours a week. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So there are, in different regions, different employment and training programs. This includes KEYS. There are these SNAP E&T providers that are like 50-50 partners. It includes those programs as well as EARN, and some career link programs as well. There are not enough of these slots to go around to cover everyone that can't find a job, unfortunately, but it is an option for folks who want to take that option. And for people who do that, they can be offered special allowances to help them participate in that, such as transportation or childcare. And then lastly is community service or volunteering. They can volunteer at any nonprofit or government agency. There's a form that the nonprofit would fill out to verify their hours. It has to be filled out at least once every 6 months. And unlike employment and training or working, it's not 20 hours a week that has to be completed. The number of hours that you have to do varies based on the size of your SNAP allotment for the whole household. So if it's just one person in the household and they're getting $292, they would need to do about 41 hours a month in order to comply. So I'm going to show on the next slide here, I'm going to show you the form that nonprofits have to fill out. So this would get filled out once a month. It just has a basic schedule that the person's volunteering, a just slight description of the task that they're performing, and then the signature of the person at the nonprofit. It does require, if you are the nonprofit, it does note on there, like, you will call the county assistance office to report that they are not doing their hours. So if someone stops showing up, you're supposed to tell the county assistance office that that's the case. The other thing about this is that depending on which county you're in, some of these are going to go directly to the county assistance office, no middleman involved. Other counties, they may have one of their contracted providers like EARN managing volunteer hours and that level of and community service participation. And so it might go through one of those providers. So that will vary depending on where you are in the state. All right, we can go to the next slide. All right, and then non-compliance with work requirements and time-limited benefits. Go on here. So if someone isn't working their 80 hours a month or unable to find an employment training opportunity or community service volunteer opportunity, this is where they go onto that off-ramp that Louise was talking about. They are subject to the time limit. So the way the time limit works is that someone is only eligible for 3 months of SNAP within a 3-year time period. That 3-year time period is the same for everyone in Pennsylvania. Our current time period is started in January of 2023 and it will end in December of 2026. So that means if someone uses up their 3 months and no longer is eligible for SNAP benefits, say they lose their benefits this December, they would not be able to apply again unless they either are able to comply with the rule or until January of 2027. Okay. And you can go to the next slide. So if it's a SNAP household of one, that case will just completely close after 3 months of non-compliance. And if there's more folks in the household, like say it's a parent with a 16-year-old, the 16-year-old will still be getting benefits, but that household size will drop to a household of one, and the benefits will be reduced for the whole household. And say in that household, the adult was still working, but they were only working 15 hours a week, so they didn't comply. Their income still counts towards the household. It's prorated. So in that situation, it's a household of two, but one of them is an ABOD, so it'd be half, 1 out of 2. Half that income would count. So you can see how benefits would get reduced pretty significantly whenever someone from the household's removed. We can go to the next slide. All right. So how would you get back onto SNAP after losing it? So there's 2 ways. One is becoming exempt. We know a lot of folks who will lose their benefits. It's because they probably should have been exempt already and it wasn't reported to the county assistance office. They may have known how to report, may not have known how to report it, things like that. So that showing that exemption will allow someone to reconnect to SNAP and reapply. Or two, they could start complying with the work requirement. If there is this extra 3 months that someone can get. So say I work during the summer, I lose my job, I'm not compliant for 3 months, I lose my benefits, I start working again, and then I lose my job, I can get another 3 months of benefits. And then my benefits would end again. So there's an extra 3 months that you can get added onto your clock if you start meeting the work requirement. All right, we can go to the next slide. So here's an example of Tyrone. So Tyrone's a landscaper. Oh, he works in the summer and has odd jobs for the rest of the year, including some work for his landlord in exchange for reduced rent, and his hours vary a lot. How might Tyrone show that he's meeting the 20-hour-a-week requirement? So we can go to the next slide. So if he applies while he's earning more than $217.50 a week, he's exempt and safe till his next renewal. If the work he does for his landlord in exchange for rent, all that work counts. So he can get a letter from the landlord documenting those hours. The odd jobs can also be combined with volunteering to get him to 20 hours a week. Or 60 days before he expects to start working the landscaping job again, he'll qualify for the state exemption so he can apply then. Okay. All right. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mary Pat to talk about immigrant eligibility.
Thanks, Anne. This federal law that passed in July that we've been talking about, that Anne and Louise have given so much detail about all the work requirements that law has added, it also created new restrictions on immigrant eligibility for SNAP benefits. That federal law, again, we've been referring to it as HR 1. You might also hear it referred to as OBBB. Either way, it's the same bill, that reconciliation package that passed into law in July. So in the next few slides, we're going to talk about the immigrant eligibility restrictions that law created. Before OBBB, there were about 10 or 11 immigration statuses that would give an individual, a non-US citizen, access to SNAP benefits. Those are listed on the left-hand side of this slide. Now that this law, HR 1, has passed, the number of eligible immigration statuses for SNAP have been shrunk dramatically, down to just 3. So now, with the passage of HR 1, the only immigration statuses that give a non-US citizen access to SNAP are lawful permanent residency, and I'm looking at the right hand of this slide here. So lawful permanent residency, Cuban Haitian entrants, and then COFA migrants. The law said that these new rules went into effect when the law passed, and the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services intends to start putting these new rules into place starting around October 1st. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit in some detail here about each of those 3 immigration statuses that are going to allow non-US citizens to retain SNAP access under this new law, starting with lawful permanent residents. So these are people with green cards. And often you will just hear them referred to as green card holders. Refugees, asylees, VAWA petitioners, T visa holders, and special immigrants from Iraq and Afghanistan are all folks who, before HR 1 passed, were eligible for SNAP just because they had those statuses. Now that HR 1 has passed, they are not eligible for SNAP unless they have lawful permanent residency. And they are all people who are on an immigration pathway toward a lawful permanent resident eligibility. So all of those folks could have a green card already, or they might be eligible to get a green card now. So for all of those folks, refugees, asylees, VAWA petitioners, T visa holders, special immigrants from Iraq and Afghanistan, they will be able to retain SNAP access if they have LPR status if they have green cards, but if they do not have green cards, they will lose their SNAP eligibility starting around October 1st. If you have done any work in the past around immigrant access to SNAP, you will know about the 5-year bar. This new law, HR 1, has not changed any of the rules about the 5-year bar. The 5-year bar remains in place exactly as it has always been. So lawful permanent residents are subject to this 5-year bar, this 5-year waiting period before they can access SNAP. But some people are exempt. So lawful permanent residents who have had a qualified immigration status for less than 5 years are ineligible for SNAP unless they are a refugee, an asylee, a T visa holder, or a special immigrant from Iraq or Afghanistan. All of those folks, if they have their green cards, they can get SNAP without a 5-year waiting period. Children under age 18 are exempt from the 5-year bar. So children with green cards don't have to wait 5 years. Folks, adults who have medical assistance for a disability are exempt from the SNAP 5-year bar. So adults with green cards do not have to wait 5 years before they can get SNAP. And then folks with 40 countable quarters of work history in the US, and then folks, LPR green card holders who are in the military or veterans, or a family member of a military member or a veteran. All of those folks are exempt from the 5-year bar. If they have their green cards, they can get SNAP without a 5-year waiting period, just like they have always been able to get SNAP without a 5-year waiting period. Next slide, please. So in addition to green card holders, Cuban Haitian entrants will also retain their SNAP access. A lot of people from Cuba and Haiti are Cuban Haitian entrants. And a lot of those folks from Cuba and Haiti who are Cuban Haitian entrants don't know. They don't know that they're Cuban Haitian entrants. It's a pretty difficult status to figure out. So I have a short summary here about what a Cuban Haitian entrant is. A Cuban Haitian entrant is a national, somebody from Cuba or Haiti, who is in the US now and was either, number one, granted parole to enter the US, even if that parole period has now expired, or they don't have parole anymore, they now have moved on to some other immigration status. Or they weren't paroled into the US, but they are here and they have a pending asylum application here in the US. Or they're in removal proceedings. So they are in deportation proceedings, but they do not yet have a final enforceable order of removal of deportation. Cuban Haitian entrants are exempt from the SNAP 5-year bar. If somebody is a Cuban Haitian entrant, they can get SNAP today without any 5-year waiting period. And then the last group of immigrants who will retain SNAP access despite the passage of HR 1 are COFA migrants. As far as I can tell, we have just about 0 COFA migrants in Pennsylvania. I might be wrong, so if folks are working with COFA community in Pennsylvania, please let me know. As far as I can tell, they are mainly out on the West Coast for the most part. Next slide. So just to quick sum up the rule here, after HR 1, there are some people who are going to lose all SNAP access altogether. And those are the folks listed on the left-hand side of this table. There's people with withholding of removal and parolees. Those folks do not have withholding of removal, does not put anybody on a path to a green card, and being paroled into the US also does not put somebody on a path to a green card. So those folks on the left-hand side, although they're eligible for SNAP today, they will lose all of their SNAP access once HR 1's rules are implemented. The folks in the middle might have green cards. So they might be able to retain SNAP access if they have a green card, if they are a lawful permanent resident. Those folks are refugees, asylees, VAWA petitioners, T visa holders, and special immigrants from Iraq and Afghanistan. All of these folks are on a path to a green card. So they might either have their green card now, or they might be have the green card soon. So if they have a green card, they can keep SNAP. But if they don't, they will lose SNAP access. And then the people on the right are the folks who are going to retain SNAP access after HR 1's rules are implemented. Green card holders, lawful permanent residents are going to keep SNAP access. Keep in mind, though, that the 5-year bar remains. Cuban Haitian entrants are going to retain SNAP access. They are exempt from the 5-year bar. And then COFA migrants also exempt from the 5-year bar and will retain SNAP access. Next slide, please. All right, I think I'm going to turn it over to Anne again to sum things up.
All right, so I'm just gonna talk about some key takeaways here. So work requirements, averaging 20 hours a week for adults ages 18 to 55 without children are going to be starting September 1st statewide. So that first month out of that 3-month calendar, for most parts of the state will be in September if folks don't have an exemption filed with the county assistance office. The new immigrant restrictions will be starting October 1st, is what we're hearing from DHS. That means refugees, asylees, and others will not be able to get SNAP unless they switch over to legal permanent residency status and have green cards. And then work requirements for adults ages 55 to 64, and for households where the children are between 14 and 17 will be starting November 1st. And that will impact folks at their next renewal if they're already receiving benefits, or at application if they're newly applying. All right. And next slide. So we really appreciate all of your help in spreading the word. So one, helping folks check if they're exempt, completing that DHS screening questionnaire, which is available on CLS's website. For people with health conditions, helping them get that medical exemption form signed. If you are a healthcare provider, just getting acquainted with that form and helping folks get that submitted would be especially wonderful. And just if someone's not complying, remember their benefits will be time limited and will end after 3 months, and they won't be able to receive SNAP again until January of 2027 unless they get an exemption filed or begin to comply with the work requirement. And next slide. All right. For immigrants with green cards, they should report that they got those to the county assistance office. A lot of folks applied when they had refugee or asylee status and may have transitioned over. But the county assistance office needs to know that they've transitioned over. So providing that proof to the county assistance office as soon as possible will help them retain their benefits. And then people subject to the time limit and immigrants should also keep an eye out for any notices from DHS about SNAP. If they are terminated, they should appeal quickly if they think that the county assistance office has messed up. And we know that these are complicated rules, so it's going to be really easy for caseworkers to make mistakes. And so appeals are the best way to make sure that someone has access to all of their benefits that they're entitled to. Next slide. All right, now it's just time for questions. All right. So we had a lot of questions in the Q&A, which we've answered many of them. I'm wondering if there's ones that we want to talk about a little bit more. Lydia, were there any that you saw that you think that makes sense for us to talk about out loud that we need to answer live?
Yeah, we got a lot of questions about exemptions. How will exemptions be verified with DHS? I know you went over this, but I think that it is useful to go over again, particularly caregiving exemption came up a lot, homeless. What do we know about how that survey form, CM558, will be processed with the CAO?
This is a really good question that we don't have a good answer to. This all has rolled out very quickly, and the county assistance office is just now being trained on this time limit, which has never had to deal with before. So the policy that went out to county assistance offices said, get this form and act appropriately, essentially. So we're not quite sure. What we assume is that if people assert that they are caregivers or homeless or pregnant, these things that don't need to be verified unless questionable, we're hoping that that just means that the county assistance office will code them as exempt. And that if people say they've got a medical condition that reduces their ability to work, that they will have the form, they will get the 1921 medical exemption form mailed to them. But we have not seen that in writing.
And as a follow-up to that, we've also had a lot of questions about what questionable is, and what we expect how DHS might make those determinations. Is there anything we can say on that?
In the past, they've said if they have inconsistent information, it's questionable. I think that we're going to see a lot of variation among caseworkers about how that's interpreted. I think the incentives these days are to exempt people if they can. And so we are hoping that there will not be a lot of questioning. But we'll just have to see how it goes.
Mary Pat, this question is for you. To confirm, if a refugee with children does not have a green card, their children will lose SNAP benefits as well?
It depends on the immigration status of the kids. So if the kids are U.S. citizens, the U.S. citizen children can keep their SNAP regardless of what the immigration status of their parents are. But if the parent is a refugee without a green card, then the parent will lose access to SNAP for themselves. So they will lose access to SNAP for themselves, but they can continue to collect SNAP for their U.S. citizen children.
Louise and Anne, will it be possible to retroactively remove a time-limited month by showing the person was exempt or complying in that month?
So if the county assistance office counts a month that they shouldn't have because, say, the medical exemption was already there, but it wasn't processed, you could certainly file to get that month removed from being counted against them. If they didn't know, then it gets a little trickier. Louise, you might have different thoughts on this. I mean, I think it's worth trying to get it taken off, especially if you know you might be in and out of compliance and need every month that you can get. Louise, do you have thoughts about this?
We just haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And I think the policy that DHS has put out doesn't answer that question. We'll
Yeah.
have to see.
Yeah.
We would certainly try.
Yeah.
Just to repeat this, because I've seen a few questions, how is DHS planning to confirm people are meeting the 20-hour per week work requirement? Will people have to submit income verification on a monthly basis?
So far, no, that is not what they're planning to do. So if when you apply, you're working 80 hours a week, so you're complying, but you're not, you're not making that 217.50, so you're not exempt. They will put you on the regular 6-month reporting, semi-annual reporting, and then you'll be expected to tell them if your hours drop below 80 per month. So that basically you're supposed to tell them so that they're counting your months accurately. And then if you don't do that, you could get hit with an overpayment if you end up getting benefits for a month that you shouldn't have gotten them. So that's the plan right now, is to have people report changes if you're in that situation. If you are applying and you're not complying, so you're only working, 60 hours a month or something like that, they'll start counting your months, and they'll give you a 3-month recertification period if it's just you in the household. For those households where it's a parent and a child, they still plan on putting them on the longer annual recertification cycle, and then just adjusting their benefits after 3 months. So it'll be trickier for people to sort of know and catch when they're in those mixed households when their 3 months are running out, because they might not see that they might not get a piece of paper in the mail that says, hey, tell us about your work hours, such as a recertification. So
Thanks. We had another question about potential budget cuts for staffs and offices, but I think this is sort of a broader question about CAO operations as these rules roll out. Do we know how this will impact clients attempting to reach their office and caseworker? Is there anything we should be telling clients?
We're very worried about this. The county assistance offices are already understaffed and are already struggling, and this is a lot of work and a lot of confusing new rules, and a lot of new paperwork coming into the office, and it's especially the clerical staff who are short-staffed. So the clerical staff who would take like that screening form or that medical provider form and scan it and attach it to an individual person's record. They are short-staffed, and we are very worried about county assistance office not being able to be on top of all of this work.
Do we know yet if the CAO will expand its employment and training referrals to other programs other than PA CareerLink? Expand its programming?
They've said they would like to. There's no new money for that. So that's a challenge.
Shifting back over to an immigrant eligibility question, would a parent that has a residence card and apply for a child that is 18 years or older be impacted? Should the 18-year-old child apply on their own to prevent from facing, I guess this is a work requirement question, actually. Does it make a difference whether the child applies with the parent or on their own from facing any issues? I'm not exactly sure what this is asking, but I think what it's asking is, I think maybe we'll lump this into a question I saw throughout the chat, which was, how do these work requirements impact households overall? Do each adult in the household have to separately prove themselves exempt or complying who might be subject to it? Or does one person being exempt the whole household? That came up many times. Did you get that, Louise?
I'm sorry, I got distracted by the Q&A. I'm sorry, I'll just close the Q&A and stop
multiple adults in a household who are subject to the work requirement, and one proves they are exempt.
Then the work requirement applies to each adult separately. So if one is exempt, the other one, it doesn't help the other one at all.
And that's also true for two-parent households. Yeah.
So you could have a two-parent household with two kids, of 14 and 17, 15 and 17. And if mom's exempt, but dad is not complying, dad could lose his SNAP, and they would go from being a household of 4 to a household of 3. And get less SNAP as a result.
Thanks. I'm gonna do two more questions and then we'll wrap up. And there are still over 100 questions we haven't answered in the chat, so we will be working diligently on getting those answered over the next few days and sending those out with a follow-up email with the recording and slides. But for a few more, I think a really important question that I've seen a few times, what is the process and timeline for somebody who needs to file an appeal? Can they appeal if they're terminated from their SNAP?
Absolutely, and they should. If you get a cutoff notice, you have 90 days to appeal it, but what you really want to do is appeal it within 15 days. If you appeal it within 15 days, in general, your benefits should continue while you wait for a hearing. And that would give you time to try to get help if you need it. Oftentimes when people are cut off, there's a paperwork problem. And during that time, while you're waiting for a hearing, you can get the paperwork, like proof of an exemption, into the county assistance office. So yes, people should appeal cutoffs if they think they're eligible.
And we'll turn to a question on immigrant eligibility. If refugees or asylees are still pending for their green card, so they have a pending application for a green card, what public benefits are they eligible for, if any?
That's a big question. So unfortunately, soon, once HR1's rules are implemented, those folks will not be eligible for SNAP. Next year, there's a set of rules going into place for Medicaid that look very similar to these SNAP rules around on the immigrant eligibility piece. So next year, refugees and asylees without green cards could also be excluded from Medicaid, but that's not until next year. TANF is still an option. HR1 has not touched eligibility or changed eligibility for TANF or LIHEAP. Those are two examples of some public benefit programs that might still be available to refugees and asylees, regardless of HR1.
Thanks, Mary Pat. And I think with that, we are at time. So as I said, we will be sending around a recording of this webinar. We will include answers to the many questions we got. It may take us a little while because there are a lot of questions, but we will get that all out to you as soon as we can. And we thank you so much for joining us on a webinar on this really important topic. And we hope that you could spread the word and get this information out to as many people as possible. Thanks again.